It's pretty common these days to feel like you've hit every milestone, right? Like you got the job you were aiming for, you secured the nice apartment, and your life is just filled with comfortable routines.
Yeah, and plenty of endless digital distractions to keep you busy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why do you still wake up at like 3 a.m. with this quiet, nagging anxiety that you're somehow squandering your one life?
Yeah.
You're checking all the societal boxes, but deep down, there's this inescapable feeling that you are, well, misliving.
Right. It is a profoundly unsettling realization. I mean, to imagine fast forwarding to the end of your life, lying there on your deathbed, and just recognizing that despite all your frantic activity, you basically spent decades chasing valueless baubles.
Oh, yeah. That's a heavy thought.
It really is. You lived a very busy life, sure, but you completely missed out on living a good one. And historically speaking, the root cause of that specific brand of modern emptiness is attempting to navigate the world without a coherent philosophy of life.
Which is exactly the gap we are going to fill today. Welcome to Deep Cuts and Deep Thinking.
Today we have a really fantastic topic to dive into.
We do. Today we're diving deep into William B. Irvine's classic, A Guide to the Good Life, The Ancient Art of Stoic Joy. We are looking at a 2,000-year-old psychological software update, basically, designed specifically to fix that modern feeling of emptiness.
Right, and it's highly practical stuff.
Totally. But let me be clear right out of the gate here. This is not about coldly suppressing your emotions or, gritting your teeth through a miserable existence. We are going to strip away the popular, completely incorrect misunderstandings of Stoicism and break down 3 concrete psychological tools you can use right now.
Tools that actually eliminate anxiety and stop you from taking things for granted.
Yes, and help you master emotional resilience. So William B. Irvine's book really paints this vivid picture of how ancient wisdom overlays perfectly onto our modern neuroses.
Our mission with this deep dive is to show you how a philosophy designed millennia ago is arguably the most effective framework for unshakable inner peace and, actually, unexpected joy available to us today. Okay,
let's unpack this, because I do have to push back a little bit right at the start.
Sure, go for it.
When I look around, modern life feels like this relentless satisfaction treadmill. We get the promotion and immediately we're stressing about the next rung on the ladder.
Oh, absolutely.
We buy a new gadget and 2 weeks later, it's just another piece of plastic gathering dust. So how on earth can a philosophy from ancient Rome or Greece actually solve modern burnout and this total insatiability?
Well, to get to the bottom of that, we have to completely reframe our terminology, because the way we use the word stoic today in casual conversation is a massive roadblock.
Right. We kind of use it as a synonym for being emotionless.
Exactly. When we say lowercase stoicism, we're usually describing someone who is cold, distant, or someone who suppresses their pain and just endures terrible suffering like a robot.
The whole stiff upper lip thing.
Right, the stiff upper lip mentality. But uppercase stoicism, the actual ancient philosophy that William B. Irvine details in A Guide to the Good Life, is a completely different animal. It was a dynamic, actively engaged way of living.
Wait, because the goal wasn't to banish emotion entirely.
Right.
Like they were aiming to banish specific negative emotions.
Yes, precisely. Things like anger, grief, chronic anxiety, and fear. But while they were eliminating those, they were intentionally maximizing positive emotions.
So it wasn't just about being numb.
Not at all. What's fascinating here is that the ultimate goal for the ancient Stoics was actually a state of constant cheerfulness. They sought tranquility, which was not some zombie-like numbness, but a profound, unshakable joy that radiates from the inside out.
Wow.
Yeah, they wanted to enjoy the world immensely, to partake in its pleasures, but without ever becoming enslaved by them.
But wait, didn't these guys just sit in monasteries meditating all day? Pretty easy to be constantly cheerful when you don't have a mortgage or a toxic boss.
Yeah, is one of the biggest misconceptions out there. The core thinkers of Roman Stoicism were absolutely in the arena. They were dealing with the most extreme, high-stakes pressures imaginable. Take Seneca, for example.
Right, Seneca.
He was a brilliant statesman, a successful playwright, and essentially the first-century equivalent of a billionaire investment banker.
Which is wild to think about.
Then you have Musonius Rufus, who was a highly pragmatic teacher running his own prominent school. You have Epictetus, who literally began his life as an enslaved person before earning his freedom and becoming one of the greatest philosophical minds of his era.
Talk about 2 completely different ends of the spectrum.
Exactly. And of course, Marcus Aurelius, who was the emperor of the Roman Empire, burdened with ruling the known world during plagues and endless wars.
Okay, I actually want to look at Seneca for a second, because the guy was incredibly wealthy. He was the emperor's top advisor. Doesn't a true philosophy of life require you to, renounce all that?
Yeah.
How does someone reconcile being a filthy rich political insider with being a true Stoic?
William B. Irvine addresses this apparent contradiction beautifully in the book. Stoicism does not require asceticism.
Okay.
It doesn't demand that you take a vow of poverty and live in a barrel on the street. The Stoic rule for wealth and comfort is simply about attachment.
Attachment? How so?
You are allowed to enjoy a nice house, a fantastic meal, or financial success, but you must remain perfectly willing to give it all up at a moment's notice without shedding a single tear.
I see.
It's a psychological boundary, You own the wealth, you never let the wealth own you.
That makes a lot of sense. Because these four men were dealing with such intense, chaotic realities, from the absolute brutality of slavery to the crushing weight of ruling an empire. They couldn't just rely on abstract theories. They needed highly practical, everyday psychological tools to maintain their tranquility.
Exactly. And that brings us to the first major tool in this framework, which directly addresses that satisfaction treadmill we were talking about earlier.
The one that keeps us constantly chasing the next thing.
Right. William B. Irvine calls it negative visualization.
Okay, negative visualization. Sounds a little dark.
It does sound dark. But to understand why negative visualization works, we have to understand the biological glitch it's designed to fix. The author highlights a psychological phenomenon called hedonic adaptation.
Right, I've heard of this.
Think about the evolutionary mechanics here. Our ancestors couldn't afford to be perfectly content with one successful hunt, or they would literally starve the following week. We are biologically wired to be perpetually dissatisfied so that we keep striving, foraging, and innovating.
So we work incredibly hard for something, right? Like a dream job, a new home, a relationship. And the moment we secure it, our brain just normalizes it. It becomes the new baseline.
Precisely.
Irvine brings up those famous studies of lottery winners. At first, they're just absolutely ecstatic, but after a few months, the thrill completely wears off, and their day-to-day happiness returns to exactly where it was before they bought the winning ticket.
That is hedonic adaptation in action. It is a brilliant survival mechanism for a caveman, but it is an absolute tragedy for a modern human trying to be happy.
Yeah, no kidding.
We are constantly postponing our joy, convinced that the next purchase or the next milestone will finally satisfy us. And the cure for this biological trap is negative visualization.
So how does the practice actually work?
The practice is to periodically take a quiet moment and vividly imagine losing the things you currently cherish most.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
You literally sit there and imagine your car being stolen, or like the company you work for going bankrupt.
Yeah.
You even imagine your partner leaving you, or waking up tomorrow having lost your health.
Yes. I know that sounds incredibly morbid to a modern ear. Like, why would you ruin a perfectly good Tuesday by vividly hallucinating a personal tragedy?
Yeah, that sounds like a fast track to a panic attack.
But the psychological shift it produces is immediate and striking. It disrupts the adaptation process. By consciously simulating the loss of your life's blessings, you forcibly remind your brain of their value.
Whoa, wow.
It makes you deeply desire the things you already possess.
It's like a cognitive hack. You don't have to wait for a real tragedy like a terrible car accident or a frightening medical diagnosis to suddenly wake up and realize how beautiful your average, boring life is.
Exactly.
You just run a simulation of that loss in your mind for, 30 seconds? And suddenly, you are genuinely thrilled just to be sitting on your average couch, drinking an average cup of coffee.
It completely revitalizes your capacity for joy in the present moment. Instead of outsourcing your happiness to some hypothetical future achievement, negative visualization anchors you in deep, profound gratitude for the people and comforts that are right in front of you.
Okay, so negative visualization is a phenomenal tool for appreciating what we already have. But what about the things we are actively trying to achieve?
Right.
How do we protect our peace of mind when we are, say, chasing a promotion or trying to launch a business or even just trying to win a local tennis tournament? Because desire inherently creates anxiety.
Which brings us to arguably the most famous Stoic concept, the dichotomy of control. Originally, the Stoic philosopher Epictetus laid down a very strict binary rule.
Okay.
He said you must divide everything in life into two buckets, things that are entirely in your control and things that are not. If something falls into the not in your control bucket, you must immediately categorize it as nothing to you and stop worrying about it.
That sounds great on a bumper sticker, but I read that section in Irvine's book and thought modern life isn't really that binary. There's a massive gray area.
And William B. Irvine makes that exact observation, which is why he refines Epictetus' original rule into what he calls the trichotomy of control.
The trichotomy. So 3 buckets.
Exactly. He creates 3 buckets instead of 2. Bucket 1 contains things you have absolutely no control over: the weather, the stock market, whether a global pandemic breaks out, or what other people secretly think of you.
Right.
You must let these go entirely. Worrying about them is a literal waste of cognitive energy.
Yeah, being anxious about the rain isn't going to stop the rain. It just means you're wet and miserable instead of just wet.
Very true. Now, bucket 2 contains things you have complete control over: your personal values, your character, your daily choices, and the goals you set for yourself. This is where you should invest massive amounts of your energy.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the genius of the trichotomy is bucket 3. Things you have partial control over.
The gray area.
Exactly. These are outcomes, like winning a tennis match or getting a promotion at work. You control your preparation and your effort, but you do not control the final outcome.
So what does this all mean in practice? Like, how do you convince your brain not to care about the outcome if you are up for a major promotion? Obviously, you want the job. How do you pursue it without destroying your tranquility?
You do it by completely shifting the goalposts in your own mind. You decouple your self-worth from the external validation. Let's use the tennis match analogy. If you step onto the court and your primary goal is I must win this match, you have just handed your happiness over to a dozen factors you can't control.
Right.
A sudden gust of wind, a terrible call by the referee, or an opponent who just happens to play the game of their life. If your goal is to win, you are deeply vulnerable to anxiety before the match and crushing disappointment after it.
So you internalize the goal. Your target shifts from winning the match to playing to the absolute best of my ability.
Yeah.
Because you have 100% complete control over your effort, your focus, and your sportsmanship. And if you play your absolute best and you still lose because the other player was simply better, you have not failed your goal. You render yourself completely invulnerable to disappointment.
That cognitive shift, internalizing your goals, is a superpower in the modern workplace. It means you can be incredibly ambitious. You can write a bold new novel, launch a startup, or run for local office, but your inner tranquility is never held hostage by the critics, the market, or the voters.
That's huge.
You still prefer the positive outcome, of course, but your actual goal is simply to do the highest quality work possible.
So we handle the future by internalizing our goals. But what about the past? We all have those moments that haunt us where we replay our mistakes on an endless loop.
Oh, definitely. And that is where the Stoics deploy a concept called fatalism. Now, today, we usually think of fatalism as a depressing, passive concept, the idea that nothing matters because everything is preordained.
Right, like giving up.
But the Stoics applied fatalism very strategically. According to William B. Irvine, you must be completely fatalistic toward the past because you literally cannot alter a single millimeter of what has already happened. And you must be fatalistic about this exact split-second present moment because it is already here.
I always think of this like a law of physics. It's like trying to unscramble an egg. Being furious that the egg is cracked doesn't fix the egg. It just spikes your blood pressure and wastes your energy.
That is the perfect analogy.
You have to treat the past like gravity, an unchangeable, fundamental law of reality that you just have to work around.
This is the ultimate rejection of the phrase, if only. If only I hadn't sent that poorly worded email, or if only I had left the house 10 minutes earlier so I wasn't stuck in this traffic.
I do that all the time.
We all do. But if only is a highly toxic thought pattern. By treating past events as totally, undeniably inevitable, you stop fighting reality. You accept it instantly, which frees up all that wasted emotional energy to focus entirely on how you are going to respond moving forward.
Okay, so we have these incredible internal frameworks. We are simulating loss to appreciate our present. We are internalizing our goals so we can't be devastated by outcomes. And we are treating the past like gravity. But there's a glaring variable we haven't talked about.
Which is?
We still have to live in a world filled with other people.
Yeah.
And other people, whether it's a rude driver or a passive-aggressive coworker, can actively try to ruin our day. So how do we protect our peace when the threat is external and social?
The Roman Stoics thought deeply about social friction because as politicians, teachers, and leaders, they interacted with difficult, frustrating people constantly.
I can imagine.
Marcus Aurelius actually had a daily morning practice. He would wake up and consciously remind himself, in essence, today I am going to encounter people who are selfish, ungrateful, jealous, arrogant, and rude. That is simply the nature of the human species.
So by anticipating it, you aren't blindsided.
Yeah.
If you walk out the door expecting a flawless, perfectly polite Disney World, you are going to be furious by 9 a.m.
Exactly.
But if you expect people to act like flawed humans, it doesn't shatter your peace when they inevitably do.
And when someone actually directs an insult at you, the Stoic method is to intellectually deconstruct it like a logic puzzle rather than reacting emotionally.
Okay, how does that work?
You pause and ask yourself, is the insult factually true? If someone mocks you for being bald, and you are indeed bald, why be angry? They are merely stating an objective fact about the universe.
Fair enough.
If the insult is false, then ask, is the source of this insult untrustworthy or foolish? If they are a fool, you should simply pity them or ignore them. Why on earth would you assign value to the opinion of a fool?
There's a fascinating technique I read in Irvine's book regarding this, originally from Epictetus. He calls it projective visualization.
Yes.
He says, imagine you are attending a dinner party at a friend's house, and their servant accidentally knocks over a beautiful cup and shatters it. What is your immediate reaction? You probably say, oh, please don't worry about it. It's just a cup. These things happen.
Right, you're very forgiving.
But when a cup breaks in your own kitchen, you absolutely lose your mind. Epictetus says the secret to tranquility is learning to say these things happen when your own cup is broken.
Think about the mechanics there. You are intentionally projecting that objective, calm distance you afford to others onto your own life. It's about learning not to take the universe personally.
Wow, yeah.
And when it comes to handling insults in real time, William B. Irvine notes that the Stoics had two preferred strategies. The first is self-deprecating humor.
Which is always disarming.
Completely. If a coworker points out a flaw in your work to embarrass you, you agree with them cheerfully and add, if you truly knew me, you'd know I have much worse flaws than that. It completely short-circuits the interaction and disarms the attacker.
I love that.
The second strategy is complete unbothered silence. Refusing to even acknowledge the slight demonstrates that you are operating on a level so far above them that their words literally cannot reach you.
That silence is incredibly powerful because it starves the instigator of the reaction they are desperate for. The default alternative for most of us is anger. But Seneca had very strong words about anger.
He really did.
He referred to it as brief insanity. Today, we have this pervasive cultural idea that anger is a useful motivator, that you should, get mad to push through a barrier or channel your rage to defeat a competitor. But Seneca warns that using anger as fuel is playing with fire, and it always backfires. It destroys your internal tranquility, severely clouds your logical judgment, and ultimately it ends up controlling you.
To inoculate yourself against that kind of emotional hijacking, the Stoics practiced a very specific exercise called voluntary discomfort.
Voluntary discomfort.
Right. Musonius Rufus, for instance, advised his students to intentionally eat very bland meals on occasion, to sleep on a hard floor instead of a bed, or to purposely underdress when going out in chilly weather.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because I can hear people asking, why on earth would a comfortable modern person choose to take a freezing cold shower or skip a meal when we have instant hot water and delivery apps?
It seems counterintuitive.
It does. But I like to view voluntary discomfort as an insurance premium. You're paying a very small, highly manageable price of discomfort right now. But what you are buying with that premium is a massively expanded comfort zone and deep reserves of willpower.
Right.
You are proving to your primitive brain that you can survive being cold or hungry or sleeping on the floor.
And that builds incredible neuroplasticity and resilience. It protects you against the total bankruptcy of happiness. If a real, uninvited misfortune strikes later, you lose your financial security, your heating goes out in a winter storm, you face a sudden crisis, you won't panic.
Because you've been there.
Exactly. You've already rehearsed this scenario on your own terms. You know for a fact that you can endure it. It systematically removes your fragility.
So we've learned how to hack our desires with negative visualization. We know how to handle outcomes with the trichotomy of control, and we know how to deconstruct the insults of difficult people.
We have a whole toolkit now.
Right. But how do we ensure we actually stick to this philosophy day in and day out? How do we stop this from just being an interesting thought experiment and make it a lived daily practice?
Well, the author details a fantastic practice called the nightly audit, which was championed by Seneca.
The nightly audit.
Yes. Before you go to sleep, you take a few quiet moments to systematically review your day. You ask yourself, what bad habit did I curb today? Where did I fall short of my principles? Did I let that passive-aggressive comment in the afternoon meeting disrupt my peace? How can I do better tomorrow?
You essentially develop this internal Stoic observer. It's almost a dual consciousness where a part of you is living and participating in the world, but another part of you is hovering just above, monitoring your reactions in real time.
That's a great way to put it.
Epictetus even suggested you should treat your primitive, impulse-driven self as an enemy lying in wait. You gotta keep a close watch on your own hardwiring.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that is exactly where the modern relevance of William B. Irvine's A Guide to the Good Life really crystallizes. Stoicism, at its core, is a tool to override our primitive evolutionary drives.
The hedonic adaptation and all that.
Right. We are biologically wired for constant status anxiety, endless craving, and knee-jerk panic because those traits kept our ancestors alive in a dangerous wilderness.
Right.
But in the modern world, those exact same drives just make us chronically miserable.
Totally.
Stoicism is the intellectual software you can install to hack those outdated drives and consciously choose tranquility instead.
But there is a crucial rule for anyone adopting this software. You must live your principles quietly. Epictetus warned that if you go around telling everyone you're a Stoic and lecturing them about philosophy, they will rightfully mock you.
Oh, for sure. Nobody likes a philosopher at a dinner party who just preaches.
Exactly. So don't lecture your friends about eating simply. Just eat simply. Don't brag on social media about your emotional resilience. Just be resilient when things go wrong. You have to practice what Irvine calls stealth stoicism. Your actions should be the only evidence of your philosophy.
Because knowledge is only valuable when it's applied. It does not matter how many profound quotes you can recite from Marcus Aurelius if you still lose your temper and lay on the horn during a minor traffic jam.
So true. So, if we look at the ultimate takeaway from this deep dive into A Guide to the Good Life, Stoicism is absolutely not about enduring a grim, joyless world with a stiff upper lip.
Not at all.
It is a highly active daily strategy for hacking your mind, managing your desires, and cultivating a deep, lasting joy that external circumstances simply cannot touch.
I actually want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your week, something that wasn't directly in the text but builds entirely on this philosophy.
Let's hear it.
Think about the digital world you inhabit. The social media apps on your phone are literally engineered by thousands of brilliant people to trigger your hedonic adaptation and farm your outrage. They are designed to make you dissatisfied and angry.
It's terrifying when you really think about it.
It is. So what if the ultimate modern act of rebellion isn't throwing your phone into the ocean, but practicing stealth stoicism right in the middle of your newsfeed? What if you actively internalized your goals and practice projective visualization the next time the algorithm tries to hijack your tranquility?
That is a phenomenal challenge for the modern world, because you don't want to wake up decades from now realizing you mislived simply because you let your biology and your newsfeed dictate your joy. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. We would love to hear your thoughts and specifically how you plan to implement your own stealth stoicism against the algorithms this week. Until next time.